Okay, welcome back, guys. So we're jumping into our first poem that we're going to go actually in detail to analyze and do a close reading of, which is a poem by Rudyard Kipling. It's called If, and you've got a video to watch about it being read by a famous actor as well that I posted on our site. And you've got your chance to do the exercise, which is answering the questions that the sheet is giving you. In this case, there's 20 questions in this poem to do a close reading. Now, I'll take you through many of those, but I'm going to also talk about a lot of other things as well, in addition to that. So when you have the poem exercises, it's for you to try to practice to do a close reading by asking important questions and analyzing figurative language techniques, figures of speech, and other techniques within the poem, which should help you get to the meaning of the poem. But a little bit of context would be helpful here. So as we said before, there's the author, and looks like I've got a thicker brush on here, so don't need quite that thick. And then we said there's always the text itself that is created by the author. And then there's us as the audience. So we want to always keep in mind those three categories to help us do a better close reading. And we won't always go into, an author background, but in this case, I think it's helpful actually to know a little bit about the author, okay? So we want to just know a little bit about the context of the poem. Okay, and then we're going to think also about the genre of the poem. Okay, the audience. For the audience, we're going to look at the application for us of the poem. And that will connect to the genre as well. Okay. But a little bit about the context. Okay, so there's a historical context. And what it had to do with war and discouragement. So actually, I'm thinking I should have written all these up there, so I'll try to use all this white space. What happened was Kipling had a friend, okay? And we're talking like late 1800s. So it's quite an old poem. And a friend of his went to a war, and they lost a big battle with the British Army. Okay, Kipling was also a British soldier in India. And so it was during colonial times, and the British controlled much of India. And so Kipling had experience as a soldier in many wars, and he wrote a lot of war poems, actually. And he also critiqued and criticized, war issues to do with colonialism and war and the British Empire. Now, in this particular case, a good friend of his was a soldier, and in a battle, we don't need to go into all the details of the specific battle and all that. You can look that up if you want. But the point of it was that his friend came back very discouraged and disappointed with this life experience of being in this battle, losing a big battle. Of course, some of their friends died and things like that, right? And so, in fact, he wrote this poem to encourage his friend and to give some hope. So the genre of our poem, we can call it like an inspirational poem. And we'll give you another word here. It gives an exhortation. Okay, to exhort is a call to action or a way of being. Could be your way of thinking, your way of behaving, your way of living, or you have to do something. Okay, so an exhortation, if you want to put it as a adjective, the word is hortatory. To give a strong encouragement. Strong encouragement. And so it's inspirational, gives a strong encouragement. So he's giving advice. And this advice and this exhortation is going to have to do with life experiences where there's this kind of disappointment. Okay? So that's a little bit about the historical context, which is useful for us to understand. And then in terms of the text, right, we talked about the types of text. So obviously we have a poem here. Within the poem, we want to think about the lines. We want to think about the meter. We want to think about if there's a rhyme and connect all of that. We want to think about the theme. And so whenever we're doing close reading of a text, we want to think about the form, which has a lot of this stuff, right? The form. The form is how we say something, but we also want to think about the content. So we talked about that in another video. Form and content, there's a relationship, right? This is what we are communicating, what the author is communicating, like the theme. The form is how they are communicating that. What's the style? What's the genre? Okay, so in this video, and I'm sure another video we'll need to get through the whole poem, we'll look a little bit at that relationship between form and content. And we want to think about, in terms of the text, the form that you choose can include something as simple as syntax, word order, grammar, right? These are all specific choices that the author makes to communicate his message, the what, the content. So let's dig in and we'll get started. And first thing we want to notice is the title. Okay, so titles are important. And if we look at a title usually is a key clue to the message. Usually titles in general have a weighty importance to them, so they can give us a clue about what the author is trying to communicate. Now remember, within the text we have a speaker, and we're not, the author is not the speaker, right? Directly. But it's related because we know a little bit of the background about the situation that gave rise to this poem. Okay? So if we think about Kipling and this historical context, we call that the occasion. the occasion for the poem. So what was the source of inspiration? What events or what was going on in the author's mind and life when they wrote the poem? That's the occasion. So we know a little bit about that. We know that that's connected to the genre and so forth. So what do we notice here? Is there anything that leaps out at us as soon as we take a look at this title? Well, you'll notice that there's this punctuation mark. Syntax, grammar, even punctuation is part of the form, right? We have if, and then boom, this long dash. We've got this long dash here. Okay. That's going to be really important, actually. You don't realize it yet, but as we get into the poem, this is going to be a key part of the message. And that's when we're going back to what we talked about in the other video, the relationship between form and content. And even something as simple as punctuation in the form is going to be important because these are connected. Okay, so we'll show that relationship, like why is this long dash important? What does this mean? And the first question begins to get you to think about something like syntax, grammar, and punctuation. And the question is, what part of speech does the word if belong to, and why is it usually used? Okay, so this is a grammar point. You think back to any English grammar that you've used previously. Well, what's a part of speech? What are some examples of parts of speech? Well, we have verbs, we have nouns, we have adjectives, we have articles and prepositions. Okay. We have conjunctions. And that's actually what if is. It's a conjunction. What's a conjunction? If you look at the word conjunction, a junction is where different things cross together. There's a neighborhood in Toronto called The Junction. And it was where all the trains, a number of train lines, all kind of came together. Con means with. Okay. So con is with, and junction is like a meeting point, where things cross. So it joins two things together. Conjoin. Join together. Conjunction. So if usually goes if this, then this. So not only is it a conjunction, it's a conditional conjunction. Okay? So it's conditional. It means if you do one thing, that will affect the result and the conclusion. Okay, so it's a conditional conjunction. If you do this, then this will happen. And because it's an advice poem, right, it's going to be connected to that idea. If, and he leaves it hanging, and then we're going to see what all the ifs are.